In 2010, Dr. Sean Marshall, the glaciologist I mentioned in the reference to the Columbia icefield, predicted that within 30 years, the area of the tailings ponds in the oil sands will be greater than the area of all remaining glacier ice in Alberta. In 2004, our initiative predicted that Lake Winnipeg would become an international symbol of water mismanagement. Lake Winnipeg is now recognized as the most eutrophic of the world's major lakes, and this means that it is the most contaminated with nutrients. The algal blooms forming each summer in Lake Winnipeg now cover almost 3 times the area of all current oil sands operations combined. The equally serious but related issue of annual flooding aside, Lake Winnipeg is now being recognized globally for the problem it has become. And over the next 5 years, our next prediction is that agricultural practices are going to be identified in Canada as the country's foremost threat to water quality and public health. And I want to be very clear in this. This is not an attack on Canadian agriculture, because we're not alone in this. The efforts made through the Green Revolution have generated some unfortunate side effects. Agricultural water use is becoming an issue globally because contemporary industrial-scale food production practices inevitably result in reduced return flows to nature of water of poor quality, which diminished and often water-starved natural aquatic ecosystems no longer have the capacity to purify. So, though it may be a heresy to say so, if we want to ensure that water availability and quality issues don't limit our country's social and economic future, we need to improve our agricultural practices. But there are also good and promising economic reasons for doing so. We should expect global food and water security to be among the most pressing political issues of our time. And provided that it can address its own sustainability problems, we should anticipate Canadian agriculture playing an even greater role in addressing these issues. Increasingly, response to the global water scarcity issue will not be defined by direct transfers of liquid water between regions and countries, but by how much water is traded among nations in the form of water embodied in food. And this is called virtual water, and virtual water trade internationally is expected to more than double between now and 2050, which is no minor proposition, especially for Canada. And some experts have predicted that as a result of that trade, agriculture will become ultimately more important to the economy of Canada than oil and gas. Now, there are other important reasons for improving our agricultural practices. International examples suggest that water conservation in the future will likely be couched in broader eco-hydrological terms. The day may be coming when sustainability will force us to integrate natural, agricultural, and urban ecosystem function into a unified whole so as to enhance overall catchment productivity. The time is coming when citizens will have to pay for ecosystem services. And when that happens, urbanites will pay farmers and others to generate those services, which will be seen to have a value equal to or greater than that of many contemporary crops. And while there's going to be resistance to that idea, we'll arrive at this because we're running out of options. There will ultimately be huge opportunity in this for those who know how to profit from broader agroecological thinking. And we are one of the places to which the rest of the world is turning to address these problems by embracing new thinking and creating new opportunities. Unfortunately, however, we're not quite ready for that yet, and these are not the only global problems that we face. On top of all these matters is the not insignificant issue of climate change. And instead of focusing on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, Canada has, a matter of policy, decided to focus primarily on adaptation. I would submit to you, however, that at the moment at least, we're not adapting to climate change in Canada. What we're doing is learning to cope with it. And I think it's fair to say that warming of the global atmosphere may not be a problem in some parts of the country. And in fact, some parts of Canada may be very welcome tonight, wouldn't it? But what will not be welcome is the loss of hydroclimatic stability that accompanies that warming. And we're beginning to see this now, and it was unexpected the extent to which these changes take place. Toronto, for example, has endured 4 1 in 100-year storms in the past 20 years. And one of these storms caused $400 million worth of damage in 2 hours. The same thing is happening in other cities around the country and around the world. And while we know that statistical clustering occurs around periods during which climatic conditions remain similarly conducive to the repetition of extreme weather events, we also know that it's here with the immediate prospects of more intense floods and droughts, rainfalls and snowstorms that our climate woes will really begin. Ours, unfortunately, is an atomized, fractious, and argumentative society. We're not very good at regulating ourselves, and we would prefer not to be regulated in some cases at all. And also what we're seeing widely in areas of water management is that people are willing to ignore regulation or even ignore or break laws with which they disagree. And this is going to find us in a very interesting situation because the loss of hydroclimatic stability will be a further test of whether our governance systems, whether our institutions actually work, and whether people can be or even want to be governed by them. And this will be an extraordinary challenge. I was in Washington, D.C. last week, and to see how divided the nation is over central issues, values, and matters, you begin to see this. And the recent ClimateGate scenario, if you could go to that, just give me a second. All right, this recent ClimateGate and GlacierGate, these scandals put into relief the depth of our division within our society over climate. And there are elements in our society that do not wish public policy to be informed by science related to the climate. And I maintain, and this is an important scenario for me to put forward to you, is that scientists should be thankful to antagonists like Mr. Sussman here for articulating their views and sharing them. Their views tell science where it has to go to validate itself in the minds of those who do not think like scientists do. But the point I want to make is that the loss of hydroclimatic stability is not going to be an easy sell to such people. And somehow science has to build a bridge to those who hold views of extreme hostility. And if this is not done, then deeply held differences of opinion over climate change could in time tear our society apart. The problem is that La Nina years like this one aside, which are projected to occur less frequently, clearly the warming record is such that we know that the last decade is the hottest on record. And certainly Russia understood this as much of their country burned this last summer, and the effects on our own Arctic are equally dramatic. And while we struggled this winter through historically what was a typical Canadian winter, temperatures in December and January in the central high Arctic were 20 degrees Celsius above normal. And this suggests, I think, that it's time for water to re-enter the Canadian consciousness. It's time perhaps for us to rethink our relationship to water and perhaps to consider a new water ethic.